So I'm here with Skye Santiago at Wildly Abstruse on TikTok, at LVXRGXRL on IG. She's also the host of the Wildly Abstruse podcast. How you doing today, Skye?
I'm doing good. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Of course, one of the things I really admire about you is that you're an advocate for Palestine. Can you talk about like why that topic's important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So up until the last few months, I actually had no idea that Palestine was under illegal apartheid state and occupation. I also grew up in a very Christian, very indoctrinated religious household. And so my upbringing was with the understanding that Israel is the promised land and these are the chosen people, the holy people of God. And so with my parents being Christian and also being pastors and heavily involved in their church, the first thing I heard about the occupation of Palestine was not too long after October 7th. And it was my mom just basically repeating what she had heard to me on the news, which was that Hamas beheaded 40 babies. And just with my limited understanding of the corruption and deception of our country and Western media news outlets, I took that upon myself to do my own research. And it didn't take very long for me to realize who the real oppressor is. And so from that point on, I took it upon myself as a moral obligation and responsibility to not only educate myself, but to deconstruct.
Yeah, and like apparently, your parents weren't too happy, about your support of Palestine. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So because of the educating or because I've been educating myself, I've learned about the term Zionism and what Zionists are. And upon that discovery, I had realized that my parents are actually Zionists. And it made a lot more sense as to why, once I became more vocal and tried to educate them about this matter, that I was met with a lot of adversity. And denial and just ignorance and dismissiveness, being told comments like protest don't do anything, and things like that. And as a result of my involvement in the movement and my advocacy, they actually kicked me out of their home, which is where I was previously residing. I'm going on over a month now that I've been homeless because of that. And I'm still showing up. I'm still going to protest because that's not going to stop me.
Wow, a lot of people I think would take like this situation and feel that being homeless, maybe they did something wrong, but you're standing for a righteous cause and you have a GoFundMe, which I'll put in the link of the video. What have you learned from the situation and how has it made you a better person?
I think, if anything, it's been a reminder of why and how it's so dangerous for us to blindly obey authority. I think a lot of American citizens, or at least I'll speak for myself, in the way that I grew up, I was told and convinced to respect my elders without inquisition or without question. And I think a lot of us who also reside in this country grew up under that same impression and scrutiny, like don't speak unless you're spoken to, don't put your 2 cents in. And so we're kind of all just like walking around blindly obeying authority. And these people who are in positions of authority, teachers, educators, and all of these systems are or have been put in place to not only separate and divide us, but also to further indoctrinate us and perpetuate their patriarchal, capitalistic, imperial colonialism agenda and narrative. I do believe it's made me a better person in the sense of I've always kind of been an advocate for the corruption and deception of our government and trying to educate my peers about these things that are taking place prior to October 7th and me coming into the understanding of what's going on in Palestine. And I actually went ghost. I went MIA on all social media platforms because it got to a point before October 7th where I felt completely overwhelmed and like my peers and society just doesn't care that all of these things are happening and our country is complicit in all these atrocities. And because I've learned about what's happened recently and what's going on in Gaza, it's made me even more motivated to continue being an advocate for the things that I used to previously advocate for, but now with a more determination and again, a sense of moral obligation to be on the right side of history and do the right thing.
Most definitely. Do you feel like, proud of like, your peers, like, people like the students at Columbia University recently who like they booed Mike Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House. Like, he was basically telling like, the pro-Palestinian protesters, go back to class. It kind of sounds like what your parents were saying. Like, does that make you feel like proud that a lot of people like, from your generation, like kind of see things the way that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And because of Colombia's solidarity with the Palestinians, there are now, I believe, from the last time I checked, 33 colleges now in America that have now joined in solidarity with their own encampments on their campuses. And there was actually a video that I watched earlier today of a father whose daughter is a student at, I believe, Berkeley or some college in California, and they're being interviewed by a news reporter. And the news reporter asked, does it concern you that your daughter's out there and could potentially, be arrested? And the father was saying, if my daughter gets arrested for fighting for the Palestinians, I will be a happy father because I know that she's doing the right thing. And it almost brought tears to my eyes because not only is this um, movement being catalyzed by my generation, but now other generations are seeing how we're moving and they want to get involved, or they're supporting us and joining the movement as well. And it's all about class solidarity, and it makes me really happy that, especially of someone from Latin descent, and in the video I was just referencing of the news reporter and the father, also someone of Latin descent, and our ancestors were also ethnically cleansed and enslaved. And I think it's really important that we continue to recruit more allies, and especially people of color whose ancestors endured somewhat of a similar fate that we see today happening with the Palestinians.
Well said. What's next for you? Because like, obviously like, you've been like kicked out by your parents, and like, I know like, obviously like you're going through a difficult situation, but still trying to advocate for Palestine.
I think what's next for me, I mean, I'm kind of in a limbo state right now. I can't really talk too much about my situation because there are legalities and things of that nature that are involved. But as long as I'm alive, as long as I'm breathing, regardless of where I reside, I'm going to continue to be involved in the movement, and I'm going to keep showing up in whatever capacity I can. Um, because that's the type of person I am, and that's what I'm going to stand for. And nothing is more important to me or matters more than not only liberating Palestine and Palestinians, but also collective liberation. Because if we collectively don't decide to take a stand, there isn't going to be a future for anyone.
Most definitely. Besides like, Palestine, what else like, is important to you?
I think it's really important that we recognize that protesting, um, as much as it is a place for community and for us to join together for a bigger cause, it's also an internal process as well. And it requires us as individuals to go within and deconstruct from whatever indoctrination we have been put under individually, whether it's religious or toxic masculinity, or just a plethora of things that as a society that and as a collective that we've been programmed and conditioned to operate and believe in. And so I think the most important thing is revolution. And I think a lot of people, when they hear that word, they think of um, the actual act of taking over the government, or just going toe to toe with, you know, law enforcement and these people in positions of authority. But I think the real revolution happens when that has already taken place and we are rebuilding communities and we are teaching each other and learning from one another things that they intentionally do not teach us in school, like how to forage and how to heal ourselves with different herbs and natural remedies. And I think that's the most important thing, is what happens after the revolution.
Wow, like yeah, like I kind of like agree with that. Like I one of like my favorite groups is Dead Prez, and that's like a big message in their music. You know, where they talk about like just as far as like especially in schools, like and they're not really teaching us like like what we need to learn in schools. Like a lot of times and stuff. Like I feel like the education system, it seems like it's in my community like a path to prison more so like than anything like but you have some really great points. I see like on your TikTok though that like you have spirituality like is a big part of you. Can you talk about like what are your spiritual beliefs in?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, actually, because as a result of me deconstructing from the Christian ideology that I grew up in, I've been looking more into my own ancestry and my own lineage and the beliefs and practices that my ancestors participated in. And in doing so, it's opened kind of this door and pathway for me to learn these things that should have been passed down through generation and tradition, but because of colonization has been erased and forgotten or diluted or demonized. And so things such as herbalism and learning more about herbs and, again, natural remedies, holistic medicine. Also, I think what I have learned so far in doing my research is that the emphasis of these practices, or at least practices that are from my lineage, which my ancestors are Taino. They are the indigenous people of the Caribbean islands, the Lesser Antilles or the Greater Antilles. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not a geographer. But anyways, um, they place a lot of emphasis on having a relationship with the earth, and the earth essentially being synonymous with God or creator, and the earth itself being an entity that we are a part of and have a symbiotic relationship with. And it's just a really beautiful thing that I'm interested in learning more about, and has a lot of emphasis on healing. Whereas, as far as the research I've done, other practices and other traditions that originate from my ancestry, like Santeria or Brujeria, are more along the lines of witchcraft, whereas Espiritismo, which is Spanish for spiritism, again, is more along the lines of what I was just saying about healing and having a symbiotic relationship with the earth.
Being Taino, like what are your thoughts? Because like, that's like, the time of Columbus, those were the original inhabitants. And like, they had like, a population of like 3 million. And basically, like, they came in and wiped out a lot of, your people,
Yeah,
you know, do you have any thoughts about that? Like, like even like today, it's like it's still called Columbus Day, like, which is kind of
yeah.
a front to, your your heritage.
Um, I there's a lot that I feel about it. First and foremost, Columbus Day, I actually don't think is celebrated here in Florida. I think just because of where like geographically located
Oh
in
yeah,
reference to that region of the world. I don't believe we celebrate that here in Florida. But it's just another reminder and example of how these colonizers have completely just rebranded this land as theirs. And it's extremely infuriating because this has been going on for centuries. This has been going on for hundreds of years, for decades. And I think when people think of the term colonization or colonizers, they assume or just automatically refer back to slavery or the colonization of Americas. And colonization is still happening today.
right.
Taking it back to Gaza and Palestine, like they are colonized. They are occupied by Israel. Israel is the colonizer. And so we see this as a way of history repeating itself, and it's in, I believe, my DNA and dormant in a lot of other people of color's DNA to feel compelled to want to join this movement and resist because, like I said, our ancestors, like it's in our blood. It's in our blood.
For sure. Being in Florida, Ron DeSantis is the governor. He is one of the highest governor disapproval ratings, but he's beloved by Republicans. What are your thoughts on him as the governor of your state?
I I think at this point, it's not really a matter of right or left or Republican versus Democrat. I believe and I I very strong-heartedly, I don't even know if that's a word. I just feel so strongly about the solution being revolution. I don't think at this point, with the trajectory that not only our country but the world is on, that voting is necessarily going to make a difference. And I think the system in its entirety needs to be completely uprooted and changed from the ground up.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, the 2024 election, though, is coming up. Like, do you have plans to vote?
I've been keeping an eye out on the other parties and who they're going to put on the ballot. Um, but I'm hoping that between now and November, we see a mass um, inflation of people who have joined the movement, and hopefully things change before then so that our entire future of this country isn't completely reliant upon who wins this year's election.
For sure. Like, but like we live like pretty much in a multi-party system, with like Democrats and Republicans, like, being like the other options. Do you think like you know, a influential candidate could come from like, like a libertarian or reform or socialist party?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't think of any candidates off the top of my head, but I think a majority of Americans aren't 100% Republican or Democrat. If I'm not mistaken, there's a statistic that indicates that a majority of, American society does fall somewhere in the middle. And so if we do have any candidates, um, whether in the independent party or whatever other socialist party, whatever other parties there are on the ballot, if they can demonstrate and just give receipts, you know what I mean, that what they're going to do, what they're actually advocating for. And because it's easy for these candidates to say what they think we want to hear, right? But if any of them are actually proactive about those things, are involved in the things that they want to help usher in into, their administration, then I think it'd be worth, going with a different party.
For sure. Like I think like, political corruption is pretty much like widespread at like all levels of the government. I think like revolution is needed, but like, what do you think could be done? Like, as far as like to fix that, what would be a solution in the meantime, like right now, like something
Mhm.
you'd like to see change or happen?
I think well, with the colleges now joining in solidarity with Gaza and other campuses joining the movement as well, I think that's a great start and will be a catalyst to getting more allies involved. I think another great tool is we've all heard of taxation without representation. And so if our tax dollars are not if like our tax dollars are literally funding genocide, and those of us who do not support that no longer want to contribute to that, then it is our duty as American citizens to not pay our taxes. And so tax resistance is another form of protesting that I've been seeing and hearing about. Boycotting is another huge way that people can contribute, because I know not everyone has the availability to go to these weekly protests. And so there's a lot of resources available for these lists of companies that are complicit in genocide, and how they're complicit, and why you shouldn't shop there anymore. I believe one of them is whattoboycott.org. There's also an app that was started in the UK called No Thanks, and it's essentially a barcode scanner. So whenever you're shopping, you can scan a product and it will tell you if that company is complicit or not. And so I think these are all like really great ways and entry points into the movement for people who are just starting to educate themselves or be involved. But I think the real work happens when we can, or a majority of us can collectively stop going to work, stop paying our bills, and cause enough economic disruption to the point where these people who are in positions of authority can recognize and remember that we are the ones who they work for. It's not the other way around.
Yeah. When you talk about boycotting, are you referring to the BDS movement? Like I know, like there's companies and stuff and everything, like Puma, for instance, which sponsors the Israel Football Association. Like there's like companies like SodaStream, which is actively complicit in Israel's policy or displacing the indigenous Bedouin Palestinian citizens. Like are you like going to boycott like companies and stuff like that, or you take it?
Yeah, so since I'm gonna say October or November, since I've learned about, what companies are and aren't complicit, I have not been to a single McDonald's, Starbucks, Pizza Hut, uh, Taco Bell, KFC, Wendy's, Burger King. I haven't shopped or ate from any of those places in months. And at this
That's
point,
dedication. Yeah.
yeah, and at this point, it is working. There are some of those companies, McDonald's and Starbucks, to be exact, or to be specific, that have already lost millions of dollars in revenue, and because of these boycotts, and are desperately make or doing collaborations with celebrities, and just upping their marketing so that they can try to get back some of the revenue that they lost. Starbucks recently did a collaboration with Stanley, that people kind of just, I guess, forgot that we were boycotting Starbucks because everyone loves these Stanley cups. And so that was kind of like a little marketing scheme that they did to try to get their money back. Starbucks also came out recently with a watermelon cup, which I'm not sure if you're aware, but Palestine or Palestinians um, are not able or allowed to fly their own flag in, where they reside, the occupied parts where they reside, or just in general. And one of the symbols that they use is a watermelon, because it consists of all the colors that are the flag consists of all the colors that are in the watermelon. So the watermelon is a symbol of resistance. And so when Starbucks came out with this watermelon cup recently, it was like, again, amidst all these boycotts, kind of like a mockery. And so a lot of people are now saying, and I've read in the comments of these posts saying how even if these companies did decide to make a statement or call for a ceasefire or whatever the case is, that they are permanently um, boycotted in our minds forever because of how blasphemous some of the things they're doing in response to the boycotts are.
Wow, like you're incredibly bright, Skye. Like a few more questions. There's this congressman. His name's Adam Smith, and like his viewpoint would be that you're a totalitarian protester and you're trying to silence anyone who disagrees with you.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your thoughts about that?
I think anyone who isn't involved or in the movement or believes that um, resistance isn't justified or that Palestinians aren't oppressed or occupied suffers from chronic cognitive dissonance. And essentially, what that is when any information or facts are provided to an individual whose beliefs automatically reject anything that does not align with their program beliefs. And so cognitive dissonance is that act of internal resistance when someone is met with information that defies what they have already been previously believed to be true. And so comments like that are just evident of the lack of awareness and education that these people possess because it doesn't take a lot of research and it doesn't take that much effort to take the initiative and learn about the truth and what the truth actually is. And comments like that, I believe, are uh, in a way kind of gaslighting and a psychological manipulation tactic to get those of us who are involved in the movement to maybe reconsider if what we're doing is actually for a good cause or just gaslighting us and very manipulative into what we're actually doing and kind of like distorting it into something that it's not.
For sure. Like, how do you fact check? Because like, there's so much information that comes out, like, even like, from Israel, they like often like, put like out fabricated, unsubstantiated,
Mm-hmm.
exaggerated stuff, like, and then you see these videos and stuff, like sometimes it'll just like make you like irate, and then you find out like later on and it's not true. So like how do you like go about like fact checking your information?
That's a great question. So there are a lot of resources. I'd say the first resource that I looked into when I was doing my research are the journalists, the Palestinian journalists who were on foot, on ground in Gaza. People like Bizan, Motaz. I don't remember the others off the top of my head, but people who are actually on the ground and documenting and putting not only their lives at risk, but having their family members be targeted by the IDF simply for speaking the truth and sharing this information that Israel, as well as our country and our media outlets, have been so desperately trying to hide or also distort. Every single, if not every single one, a majority of the um, media outlets here in the West are owned by or um, employ a lot of Israelis. And so that just further proves that there's this whole agenda to propagate this false narrative.
For sure. I know you have a GoFundMe. I'm gonna put it in the link for the interview and stuff. And then you're also on IG at LVXRGXRL, and then on TikTok at WILDYABSTRUSE. You have 2 episodes for your Wildly Abstruse podcast. Do you plan on making more?
Yes, thank you for asking. So I do plan on relaunching my podcast. The first episode is kind of like just a little introduction. And then the second episode is more of like an in-depth, like just telling a little bit about myself, why I made the podcast, what the podcast is intended for. But I do plan on relaunching that soon. I will post a video on my TikTok once that episode has been recorded or posted, whatever the case is. And I do anticipate on inviting guests and having people on, the panel, and kind of talking about similar things of what we're talking about now, and also diving into other topics like spirituality and things of that nature.
Yeah, like I think you'd be a great influencer. Like, I really enjoy your content, and like, I wish you much success in the future. Like, what's next for you?
Um, what's next for me? That's a great question. I'm honestly not entirely sure. I feel like I'm being led in many different directions. So I think at this point, my job is kind of to just be adaptable and just go wherever the universe wants to take me. I have been recently inspired because of the Palestinian liberation movement and their resistance, starting to write again. I was previously in the works of creating a book or just brainstorming about creating a poetry book. And if you wouldn't mind, can I actually read you something that I
Yeah,
wrote?
I love it.
Okay. Okay. This is a poem I wrote a couple weeks ago. It's called Everyone is Palestinian. And it is, again, inspired by the Palestinian resistance movement, um, and my involvement in protesting. It's a little bit long, but here we go. You think you're unaffected by a nation of people being ethnically cleansed, an ongoing genocide of brothers and sisters and family you've never met. Does it really matter if you're not from the same descent, or how we argue over holy words and which religion determined what they meant? You won't shame or tell infants to repent, but when they're older, you'll tell them they'll go to hell if they disagree with what man said, God said, as the ancestors died being forced to repeat it. Innocent children pledging allegiance to a flag and a bloody star-spangled banner decorated past. All right, kids, now sing along with the class to camouflage the truth of all that came before that. But do you even know how many ancestors a person has? I said, do you really even know how many ancestors you have? For you to be born today from 12 previous generations, you needed a total of 4,094 ancestors over the last 400 years. So, how many for the previous unaccounted 159, 600,000 years since the modern Homo sapien? And I don't know a single one, not a name or a story or a testimony. Do you? Hundreds of years of thousands of ancestors silenced and forgotten, demonized and oppressed, displaced, enslaved, whitewashed, and distressed. Did I mention the women were topless? They were safe. There was no rape until they came on their ships and called us Indians. But what am I really? Is it where I was born, where I grew up, where my parents are from, or their parents? And what about their great great grandparents' parents? I'd call myself tricultural and pride myself in these labels. I'm Spanish, I'm Afro Latina, I'm Boricua, I'm New Yorican. But some people hear I'm dirty, I'm lazy, I'm savage, I'm ghetto. What we really mean is our bloodlines have been diluted with injustice and society adorned by ignorance. No soy yo que es un salvaje. Wait, I'm sorry. I forgot Spanish isn't actually my native language. We're the Taínos and Arawaks. Don't you know your roots are indigenous? So does it really matter what you call me or where I'm from if it's all just a byproduct of colonialism? Call me the continuation of the lives that have been erased, the manifestation of prophecy, the physical incarnation of an entire lineage gone but never forgotten, the redemption of all those who have come before us, the stepping stones of all those who come after, the voices of the armies of ancestors who walk alongside us proudly and boldly, standing in solidarity with those who have passed the torch onto us, illuminating the ways in which we have all been lied to and deceived and divided, but never conquered. The catalyst of the ascension and evolution of humanity and our consciousness, picking up where we left off the many times we did over the centuries, only to return again and again, one as a queer, one as a Palestinian, as a Black sheep, as a generational curse breaker, as a freedom fighter, as a visionary, as an artist, as a rebel, as a dreamer, as a painter, as a dancer, as a singer, as a writer, as a poet, as a musician, as an anarchist, as a revolutionist, a humanitarian, as a philanthropist, as a leader, as a healer, as a lover, as a friend, as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Jew, as a Buddhist, as an agnostic, a nihilist, as an existentialist, and an atheist, as a patriot, as a veteran, as a medic, and as a felon, as a first responder, as a barefoot hippie pothead stoner, as a psychedelic and mushroom lover, as a way shower, as a light bearer, as an astral surfer of cosmic waves, as an interdimensional sailor of new horizons, as a guardian of Mother Earth and all her inhabitants, as a pioneer of the future and a redeemer of our ancestral past, as a liberator of humanity, as an ally, as a human, as a being, as a universe, as one. The Bloods and the Crips, two infamous gangs notorious for their rivalry, called a truce during the peak of Black Lives Matter protests in the summer of 2020 in lieu of George Floyd and countless of other victims of police brutality. Since October 7th, thousands of people and children have died at the hands of an illegal occupation and apartheid state, hundreds of thousands since 1948, millions since the European colonization of America, let alone Palestine. What did the world do then? What will the world do now? Wait, I think you muted yourself. I can't hear you.
Oh, Skye Santiago, that was beautiful. Definitely thank you so much for joining me. And I'd love to have you back anytime. At Wiley Abstruse on TikTok, at LVXGXRL on IG. And I'll put the link for your GoFundMe in the description, and I'll share this on Instagram and TikTok. And I really appreciate you.
Thank you. We'll be in contact for sure.
Yeah.